Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are going to do something a little different.
A little bit of a change of pace.
Yeah, exactly. Usually we're talking tech trends, AI, where the economy is going. But today, to really get our heads around why the modern world can feel so, well, fragile and frankly, often so unfair, we have to look backward.
Way back in some cases.
We are cracking open a set of ideas that feels less like a business book and, I don't know, more like a survival manual for a chaotic world.
It really is. It's a survival manual rooted in some incredibly ancient wisdom, but then it gets applied to things like, modern hedge funds and heart surgery. It's a wild ride.
It is. And honestly, the title of the source material alone just stopped me in my tracks. I'm looking at the stack of notes here, and the headline is, Why Each One Should Eat His Own Turtles.
It is a memorable image, isn't it? I mean, taken literally, it sounds like some pretty terrible culinary advice.
It sounds like a nightmare. My first thought was, is this a cooking show gone horribly wrong? Are we doing a deep dive into survivalist cuisine? But as soon as you start reading, you realize this isn't about seafood at all.
Not even a little bit.
It's about a fundamental principle that we seem to have lost, or at least, we've forgotten it in our complex bureaucratic society. We're looking at a text that weaves together Roman Stoics, Wall Street trading floors, ancient myths, and modern medical ethics to get at one single core idea: skin in the game.
Right. And skin in the game is a phrase we hear tossed around all the time, especially in boardrooms.
Oh, constantly.
It's usually used by a CEO trying to motivate employees, saying we all need to have skin in the game. But usually that just means they want you to work overtime for the same pay.
Right. It's a one-way street.
Exactly. But the source material we have today treats it as something much, much deeper than a business buzzword. It treats it as a necessity for justice, for logic, and really for the very survival of systems.
It frames it almost as a filter for reality. If you don't have skin in the game, you literally don't understand the world you're operating in. You're playing a video game with other people's lives.
That's a great way to put it. It's about the symmetry of risk and reward. It's about cause and effect being linked. And when that symmetry breaks, when you have all the upside but someone else holds all the downside, well, that's when things start to fall apart.
Or just collapse entirely. So before we get into the really heavy stuff, the investment bankers and the doctors and the journalists, we have to address the turtles. I mean, we just have to. Where does this legend come from? Because it's such a specific, bizarre image.
It's an ancient adage, and the origin story is quite graphic, actually. It's a myth that serves as a very potent warning.
Okay, lay it on us.
The legend goes that there was a group of fishermen. They're out at sea, dragging their nets, working hard, and they catch this absolutely massive haul of turtles.
So they're thinking they've hit the jackpot. This is a big one.
They are ecstatic. In their minds, they're already counting the profits, imagining this incredible feast. They bring them all back, they cook them up for a huge communal meal, expecting some kind of delicacy.
It's not.
It's the opposite. As soon as they start eating, the reality hits them. These turtles are, well, edible in name only. They taste terrible. They're rubbery, foul, just barely palatable. It's a disaster.
So the dream turns into a nightmare. They're stuck with a mountain of bad food and hungry bellies.
Precisely. And just as they're sitting there contemplating what to do with this inedible mess, do they throw it back? Do they just starve?
Yeah.
Who happens to walk by? Mercury.
The god Mercury, of all people.
The very one. And Mercury is such a fascinating figure to have in this story because of his, let's call it his portfolio.
Right, he's not just one thing.
No. He's the god of commerce, yes, which makes sense for fishermen. But he's also the patron of thieves, of luck, and of trickery. He's the ultimate multitasker of the pantheon. He's the guy who knows all the angles, who cuts all the corners.
So the fishermen see Mercury and a little light bulb goes off. They think, perfect, we can invite him to join us.
Exactly. But they aren't being generous. They are trying to execute a transaction. It's a hustle. They're trying to offload the bad stew on a god. They invite him to eat, hoping that if he eats it, maybe they won't have to. Or maybe they just want to get on his good side by offering him something, even if it's garbage.
They're trying to transfer the pain, the consequence.
Exactly. But Mercury, being the god of trickery, spots the hustle immediately. You can't con a con artist, right?
Of course not.
He realizes he's only being invited to relieve them of their burden. So what does he do? He gets angry. He forces them to eat the turtles themselves. Every single last bite.
Ouch. That's some serious poetic justice, I suppose.
And that right there establishes the core principle of this entire deep dive. You need to eat what you feed others.
Wow. That is such a powerful, visceral image. It's not just do unto others, is it? The golden rule is nice, but it's a bit abstract, a bit polite. This is gut level. It's if you cook the stew, you better be willing to swallow it.
And that brings us to the broader theme here, asymmetry. The source material argues that the root of almost all unethical behavior and a lot of systemic collapse is when that simple rule is broken. When one person cooks the turtle and someone else is forced to eat it.
It's when the person giving the advice or selling the product or, making the policy doesn't suffer the consequences if things go wrong.
It's the complete separation of risk from reward. We see this literally everywhere once you start looking for it. It's like a lens.
Once you put on the skin in the game glasses, you can't unsee it.
You really can't. And we're going to take a journey today to see how this plays out in the real world. We're going to look at why you should probably never trust a lecture agent, how Wall Street banks used to stuff their clients with toxic assets, why ancient corn merchants in Rhodes argued about ethics, and why your doctor might be gaming the system against your own long-term health.
It sounds like we're going to make some people uncomfortable today.
If we're doing our job right, absolutely. I hope so.
Okay, let's start with something that I think everyone listening has experienced in some form. Unsolicited advice. You know that moment when someone comes up to you, a friend, a colleague, a consultant, and they lead with that phrase, you know what would be great for you.
The good for you trap. It's so common. And the author of our source material shares a personal story that just perfectly illustrates this trap. It involves a lecture agent.
Right, so the author recounts getting this letter out of the blue from an agent. And the pitch is so seductive. I was reading it thinking, I would totally fall for this.
What was the angle?
The agent basically says, look, you're an intellectual, you're a man of ideas, your time is precious, you want to pursue knowledge, you want to learn about gardening or stamp collecting or...
I think squid ink recipes was one of the specific examples, which is just perfect.
It's perfect. It just shows how detached the author wanted to be from the mundane world. So the agent says, you want to study squid ink recipes. You don't want to deal with the gritty details of booking travel and negotiating fees and chasing down invoices. Let me handle all that dirty work so you can live the life of the mind.
And notice the framing there. This is the crucial part. The agent isn't saying, hey, I'm a professional, I want to make a commission off your labor. No, he's saying, this is good for you. He is framing his service as an act of pure benevolence.
He's the savior coming to rescue the great thinker from the muck.
Exactly. And the author admits he was a bit of a sucker at the time. He totally bought into it. He let this agent handle all his bookings, specifically in a foreign country where the agent was based. He thought he had successfully outsourced the headache.
And for a while, it probably seemed fine. The gigs happened, the money came in. But that's the tricky thing about asymmetry, isn't it? The consequences are often delayed. They're hidden. It's not immediate.
No, it took 6 years. That's the time lag. 6 years later, the author gets a very official, very scary letter from the tax authorities of that foreign country. He's in big trouble.
What happened?
It turns out the agent hadn't been handling the taxes correctly or at all with regard to the residency status or withholding requirements. It was a complete mess.
So naturally, the author panics. He calls up the agent. He says, hey, did you know about this? You're handling all the administration. Did this happen to your other U.S. clients? We need to figure this out and fix it.
And the response he gets back is the absolute smoking gun of asymmetry. The agent replies simply and curtly, I am not your tax attorney.
Wow, that is just ice cold.
But it is so instructive. This is the definition of the problem. The advice to hire the agent was great for the agent. He got his commissions immediately, every single time the author spoke. He took all of the upside. But the harm, the tax trouble, the fines, the legal nightmare, that fell entirely on the author. The agent had absolutely no downside. He didn't have to eat the turtle he had cooked.
It's amazing how quickly that I'm here to help you facade just evaporates the second the risk materializes.
It's gone, instantly. And this leads to what the source calls the good for you detector. It's a mental tool. How do we spot these people? Because they're everywhere. They're in our banks, our HR departments, our government. They sell us cars and mortgages.
The source suggests a very simple heuristic, a mental shortcut.
It's almost a cynical rule of thumb, but it's a necessary one. Beware of anyone who gives you advice that is framed as good for you, if it is also, and very clearly, good for them.
It sounds cynical, but when you think about it, it's actually just protective. It's a defense mechanism.
It's necessary. If a real estate agent tells you it's a great time to buy a house, and you know they make a 3% commission on the sale, you have to discount that advice. They have a powerful incentive to get the deal done, regardless of whether the market is actually good for you, the buyer.
The source material actually lists a few questions to ask yourself when you get this kind of advice. Are they selling something?
The most basic one.
Are they trying to marry off their daughter? Which is a more old-fashioned way of putting it.
Right. Do they have a personal stake in the outcome that they're not telling you about?
And my favorite, do they have an axe?
An axe. Yeah, do you explain that term? It's from the trading world.
It's a great piece of jargon. In the trading pit, if someone is pushing a certain stock really hard, you'd turn to them and ask, do you have an axe? What you're really asking is, do you have a specific interest in this transaction?
You're asking, do you have a warehouse full of this stuff that you are desperate to get rid of?
Exactly. If someone has an axe to grind, their advice is tainted. It's not advice anymore. It's a sales pitch disguised as advice.
So the turtle story is basically the archetype for all these transactions.
It is. If the person offering you the stew isn't sitting down to eat it with you, don't trust the stew. If the architect doesn't live in the building he designed, be very careful. If the pilot isn't on the plane with you, well, that's a drone, and that's a whole other ethical debate for another day.
A whole other deep dive.
This transitions us perfectly to a place where bad stew is routinely served on fine china, Wall Street. The source material takes us back to the author's days at what he calls a white shoe investment bank.
Yes, and this distinction he makes between white shoe and black shoe is really evocative. It paints such a clear picture of the class divide within the world of finance.
White shoe refers to the old school establishment firms, right? The blue bloods.
Right. The term supposedly comes from the white buck shoes that the Ivy League elites used to wear in the summer. It refers to the partners, the aristocrats of finance. These are the guys playing golf at exclusive country clubs, cultivating this image of pristine ethics and sober professionalism.
They're the advisors. They speak in hushed, confident tones about things like wealth preservation and long-term strategy.
They're the face of the firm, trustworthy, noble, supposedly above the fray.
But then you have what he calls the black shoe days.
This refers to the actual grunt work, the salespeople and the traders in the trenches, the engine room. And the source describes their job with brutal, refreshing honesty. Their job wasn't to advise. Their job was to unload inventory.
Yeah, not just any inventory, not the good stuff.
No. They had to unload the stuff the traders were stuffed with.
Let's unpack that term stuffed. It sounds deeply uncomfortable, and I think that's the point.
It is uncomfortable. In trading, if you are stuffed, it means you have way too much of a certain security. Maybe you bought too much and the market suddenly turned against you, or maybe a big client dumped it on you and now you're stuck with it. Usually it's something that is losing value or is incredibly risky. You are holding a ticking time bomb.
You have to pass the hot potato before it explodes in your hands.
Exactly. You need to get off your books, off your balance sheet to lower your risk profile. But here's the catch, and this is the important part. You can't sell that bad inventory to other professional traders.
Why not? They're the ones with the big money.
Because they are professionals, they would smell the rot immediately. If a trader from, say, Goldman tries to dump bad stock on another trader at Morgan Stanley, the other trader knows exactly what's happening. They see the volume, they see the price action, they know you're desperate.
So what happens?
So they either refuse to buy it at all, or they drop the price so low it's basically worthless. And worse, your reputation is ruined. You become known as the guy who tries to dump garbage on his peers. You're out of the club.
So if you can't sell to the pros, the insiders, where do you go?
You go to the buy side, you go to the client. The example given in the text is the finance department of a municipality in New Jersey.
The unsuspecting outsider, the person who doesn't live and breathe this stuff.
Someone who isn't in the pit every day. Someone who manages a pension fund or a city budget. They buy their suits at a department store, not a bespoke tailor on Savile Row. They are impressed by the white shoe aura of the big bank. They trust the brand.
And this is where the infamous wine dinner comes in. I found this part both fascinating and absolutely horrifying. It's a ritual.
It's a masterclass in psychological manipulation. The salesman from the big bank invites this client, the guy from the New Jersey municipality, out to a super fancy dinner in Manhattan. They order a $2,000 bottle of wine.
$2,000? That's a mortgage payment for a lot of people.
And to the client, this feels like incredible generosity. He's thinking, wow, this big shot banker really values our relationship. He's treating me like a king. He feels special. He feels elevated. And most importantly, he feels obligated.
The principle of reciprocity. If someone does something nice for you, you feel like you have to do something nice back.
Exactly. But to the salesman, that $2,000 bottle of wine is not generosity, it's an investment. It has a massive ROI. By buying that bottle, he effectively owns the client for the next few months. Because of that warm, fuzzy feeling and the subtle, unspoken pressure of the gift, he can now offload $100,000 worth of bad profits onto that client's books.
He stuffs the client.
He stuffs the client with the toxic assets that he couldn't possibly sell to the pros. So the client goes home feeling great, thinking, what a great guy, he bought me that amazing wine, while unknowingly holding a portfolio that is about to underperform or completely blow up.
And the salesman's motto, as quoted in the text, is just chilling, rip them off, don't tick them off.
Rip them off, don't tick them off. It captures the cynicism perfectly. The goal isn't to help the client, it's to extract value from them without them realizing it until it's far too late. Keep them happy while you pick their pocket.
It's the absolute epitome of asymmetry. The salesman gets his bonus, the firm gets the risk off its books, and the municipality in New Jersey, and by extension the taxpayers there, they're the ones left eating the turtles.
And you have to remember the other quote from the salesman who drove the Rolls-Royce. He said, remember that every day a new customer is born.
Meaning, it doesn't even matter if we burn this client. There's always another sucker down the line.
It creates a predatory ecosystem. Now, the expert in the text makes a very important distinction here, and we need to be careful not to paint all of commerce as evil. He says selling is ethical, and giving advice is ethical.
Right, they are two different valid professions.
The problem is the breach. The problem is when you mix them, when you blur the line. If I am a used car salesman, and I tell you, this car is fantastic, look at this beautiful paint job, listen to that engine, I am lauding my merchandise. That is expected. You know I'm selling. You have your defenses up.
It's caveat emptor. Buyer beware. You know the game.
Exactly. But if I dress up as your independent financial advisor or your fiduciary, and I say, looking at your long-term well-being and your family's future, you really need this specific financial product, while secretly getting a huge kickback or offloading my own risk. That is the breach. You can laud your merchandise, but you cannot present it as objective, disinterested counsel.
It seems like that line is blurred constantly in our economy today. I mean, just look at influencers on social media. Are they advising us on what to buy, or are they just selling to us? It's impossible to tell sometimes.
It is the defining feature of the modern service economy, I think. We're constantly being sold things under the guise of advice.
I want to take this back even further, because while Wall Street may have perfected this, they certainly didn't invent it. The source material takes us all the way back to ancient Rhodes for a philosophical debate about corn. This is the real root of the problem.
The corn and Rhodes. This is a classic thought experiment from the Stoic philosophers. It was debated by Cicero, among others. It gets right to the heart of the matter.
Can you set the scene for us?
Okay. Imagine you're a merchant. You are sailing a ship full of corn from Alexandria, which is a place of abundance, to the island of Rhodes. Now, Rhodes is in the middle of a terrible famine. People are starving. The price of corn is sky high. Panic is setting in.
So this merchant is about to make an absolute fortune. He has the only supply of corn in town.
He is, but, and here's the twist, he knows a secret. He knows that he is just the first ship. When he was leaving port in Alexandria, he saw them. There's a whole fleet of other ships, all loaded with corn, right behind him. They'll probably arrive in Rhodes in a day or two.
And once that fleet arrives, the supply skyrockets.
And the price will crash right back down to normal levels.
So the merchant has a very narrow window of opportunity to sell at the inflated famine price.
Exactly. So the ethical question that the Stoics posed is this. Does he tell the Rhodians? Does he pull into port and say, hey, I'm happy to sell you my corn, but just so you know, prices are about to drop because a whole fleet is on its way? Or did he keep his mouth shut and sell at the highest possible price?
This sparked a big debate between two philosophers, right? A guy named Diogenes and his student, Antipater.
Yes. Diogenes of Babylon takes what you might call the hard-nosed trader stance. He argues that the merchant only has to disclose what civil law requires him to disclose. It is not illegal to keep quiet about the other ships.
It's not my job to inform my customer.
Right. He brought the corn, he took the risk of the voyage, he deserves the reward. Buyer beware. If the buyer doesn't have good information about the market, that's the buyer's problem, not the seller's.
That sounds exactly like the Wall Street salesman. I'm not your tax attorney. I'm not your market analyst. It's the same logic.
It's precisely the same logic. It's the view that information is a proprietary asset that you can leverage. But then you have his student, Antipater of Tarsus. Antipater takes the opposite view and argues for total absolute transparency. He says you must disclose everything you know. You cannot have a secret advantage.
Why not?
He argues that we are a community. He says something like, we are all part of the same body. You shouldn't profit from the ignorance or desperation of your neighbor. To do so is a fundamental violation of the social bond that holds us together.
So who wins that debate? In the modern world, I mean.
Well, this is where it gets really nuanced and interesting. In the modern trading world, it's a mix. The text points out that stuffing, hiding your inventory or your secret knowledge, is a strict no-no between professional traders. If you did that to a fellow partner at Goldman Sachs, you'd be ostracized. Your career would be finished.
Because you have to work with them tomorrow, you're in the same tribe, there's a shared code.
Right. There's an expectation of reciprocity and trust. But, and this is the crucial part, it was considered perfectly permissible to do it to the Swiss.
The Swiss? What does that mean?
It was their internal flang for the anonymous outsiders, the random suckers far away, the municipality in New Jersey, the pension fund in Germany. The ethical wall protects the club, the fellow professionals, but it does not extend to the Swiss. So they apply Antipater's ethics of total transparency to each other, and they apply Diogenes' ethics of buyer beware to their own clients.
That is incredibly, profoundly hypocritical.
It's tribal. It's human nature in a way.
This brings up a really interesting point the source makes about the difference between law and ethics. Diogenes relies on the law. It's not illegal, so it's okay. Antipater relies on ethics. It may be legal, but it's not right.
And the source argues that the ethical is always more robust than the legal.
What does robust mean in this context? Stronger, more durable.
Exactly. More durable. It means it lasts. It's invariant to time and place. Laws come and go. They depend on jurisdiction. In one country, you have to disclose the corn. In another, you don't. In 2005, subprime lending is perfectly legal and celebrated. In 2010, it's heavily regulated and condemned. The law is fluid and can be manipulated.
But the ethics are solid.
The ethical principle that you shouldn't take advantage of someone's ignorance or desperation, that stays. That has been true for 2,000 years, and it will be true for 2,000 more.
The source even makes the claim that investment banks actually like more regulations, which sounds completely counterintuitive. You'd think they'd want a lawless Wild West.
It does sound backward, doesn't it? But think about it. If you have 1,000 pages of complex financial regulations, who can afford to hire the armies of lawyers to find all the loopholes? Who can afford the compliance officers to fill out all the forms?
Only the biggest banks.
Exactly. Complex regulations create a massive barrier to entry for smaller competitors. They create a complex game that only the wealthy and well-connected can play and win. If the rule was simply total transparency, Antipater's simple ethical rule, the big banks would lose their edge. Anyone could compete on a level playing field. They make their money by gaming the gap between what is legal and what is ethical.
That is a cynical but incredibly insightful way to look at regulation. Complexity favors the insider, always.
It's why the source says, laws come and go, ethics stay. The smart move is to stick to the ethics.
Let's pivot to how different cultures have tried to codify this very ethic of transparency. The source material dives into some fascinating concepts from Sharia law and the Talmud.
Yes, and this is fascinating because the author views something like Sharia law not just as religious doctrine, but as a kind of museum of ancient Mediterranean and Semitic trading lore. These rules weren't just invented in a vacuum. They preserved the hard-won wisdom of the Phoenicians, the Babylonians, the Greeks. They are the accumulated knowledge of how to keep a marketplace from eating itself alive.
And central to this is the concept of gharar. Can you explain that?
Gharar. It's a really important concept in Islamic finance. It is often translated simply as uncertainty or deception, but the source defines it much more precisely as inequality of uncertainty.
Inequality of uncertainty. Okay, let's unpack that.
It means that a transaction is essentially theft if one party has certainty and the other party has uncertainty.
Can you give us an example?
Sure. A simple one would be if I sell you a sealed box and I say, give me $50 for whatever's in this box, but I know for a fact that the box is empty.
Yeah.
In that case, I have certainty, you have uncertainty. That is gharar. That is forbidden.
Because the risk is not shared. I'm taking all the risk and you have none.
Exactly. But if we are both betting on a future venture, say we are funding a trade caravan together, and neither one of us knows if it will succeed or fail, that is permitted.
Yeah.
In that case, both parties face the same uncertainty. The market future is known only to God. As long as we are both facing the same unknown together, the transaction is fair.
It's only when I know the outcome and you don't that it becomes predatory.
Right. It's the corn and roads problem all over again. If the merchant knows the fleet is coming, he has a degree of certainty. The buyer has total uncertainty. That is Gerar.
Then we have the Talmudic approach, which seems to go even further into the psychology of the seller. There's this amazing story of Rav Safra.
This is a beautiful story. It's all about what the source calls transparency of intention. So Rav Safra is a well-known scholar and also a trader. He's in the marketplace selling an item, maybe a donkey or some goods. A potential buyer comes along while Rav Safra is in the middle of his daily prayers.
And in his tradition, you absolutely cannot interrupt prayer for business.
Right. He is in deep meditation. He can't speak. He can't even acknowledge the buyer. The buyer sees the item he wants and offers a price. He says, "I'll give you 10 coins for it." Rav Safra, of course, doesn't answer because he's praying.
The buyer misinterprets the silence completely.
He thinks Safra is playing hardball. He thinks, oh, he's refusing my offer. The price must be too low. So the buyer raises his own bid. Okay, fine, 15 coins. Safra still doesn't answer. All right, 20 coins, final offer.
Now, most people, certainly most modern business people, would finish their prayer, smile, and say, done, 20 coins, pleasure doing business with you.
They'd call it a lucky break, a gift from God even, but not Safra. When he finishes praying, he turns to the buyer and says, I will sell it to you for 10 coins.
For the original price he was offered.
Yes, and his reasoning was that in his own mind, when he heard the first offer of 10, he had mentally agreed to it. He had said yes in his heart. The fact that he was physically unable to speak shouldn't change the substance of the deal. To take the higher price would be to profit from a simple misunderstanding. It would be a violation of his own intention.
That is an incredibly high ethical bar. That's transparency of intention. It's not just about what you say, it's about what you think.
It is. The author says he sighs with Rav Safra completely. He talks about that feeling of shame when a salesperson gets an improvement on a price that you didn't even ask for. It just feels dirty. It feels like a kind of theft.
But, and there always seems to be a but in these stories, the source asks a critical question about the Rav Safra story. Was the buyer a Swiss?
Exactly. The story doesn't specify if the buyer was an insider, another scholar, a member of the tribe, a neighbor, or if he was a total outsider. And this introduces the massive problem of scale.
The problem of the other. The person outside your circle of trust.
We all have these concentric circles of ethics. The rules work incredibly well inside the club. Rav Safra probably wouldn't dream of ripping off his brother. The Goldman Sachs partners don't rip each other off. But as soon as you step outside that immediate club, the rules start to degrade.
The source lists some pretty stark historical examples. Spartans versus the Helots?
The Spartans were famously egalitarians among themselves. They shared meals. They trained together as equals. But they hunted the Helots, their slave class, for sport. Roman citizens had a complex system of rights, but barbarians had none. Gypsies have strict ethical rules for other gypsies, but a completely different set of rules for the payos, the non-gypsies.
So the argument here is that ethics don't really scale, that we can't treat the whole world like we treat our family.
The general kills the particular. That's the phrase the source uses. It means we are wired to be ethical to our tribe, our neighbors, the people we can see and touch and interact with. When the group gets too large, when it becomes an abstract concept like humanity, the connection breaks. You can't love 8 billion people in the same way you love your own child. The wiring isn't there.
This leads directly to the tragedy of the commons.
Right. A concept a lot of people have heard of. Elinor Ostrom, who won the Nobel Prize, studied this in depth. The basic idea is that if you have a shared resource, like a pasture for grazing sheep, everyone acting in their own self-interest will overgraze it. They'll add more and more sheep to maximize their own benefit, and eventually the shared pasture gets destroyed for everyone.
But Ostrom found that's not always true. She found a solution.
Well, she found the conditions under which it works. And the key condition is that the community has to be small. If everyone in the village knows everyone else, shame works. Social pressure works. If I put too many sheep on the pasture, my neighbor yells at me over the fence, or I get dirty looks at church. I am forced to eat my own turtles because the community is watching and holds me accountable.
But in a massive anonymous city of millions,
shame dies. You don't know your neighbor. You don't care what they think.
Yeah.
So you abuse the commons, whether it's littering in a park or cheating on your taxes, the feedback loop is broken.
So the source is essentially arguing that the whole idea of the global village is a myth.
It's an oxymoron.
Huh.
A village is defined by its small scale and its high-trust relationships. You simply cannot scale that to the entire planet. It doesn't work.
This brings up the political implications, which are fascinating. The source mentions something called the Graham Brothers diagonal. I absolutely loved this breakdown because it totally ignores the standard tired left versus right political spectrum.
It's a brilliant way to shatter that false dichotomy. The saying goes, I am, at the federal level, a libertarian, at the state level, a Republican, at the local level, a Democrat, and at the family and friends level, a socialist.
That just makes so much intuitive sense. With my own family, of course I'm a socialist. I share everything. I don't charge my kids for dinner. From each according to his ability to each according to his needs. That works perfectly in a family unit.
Right. It's a high-trust, total sharing environment.
Then, at the level of my town, I want to help out. I'm basically a Democrat. I want good schools. I want nice parks. I'm willing to pitch in my tax money because I can see the direct benefit to my community and my neighbors.
But as you get further and further away from home,
With the federal government, a giant anonymous bureaucracy thousands of miles away, I want them to mostly leave me alone. I'm a libertarian. I don't trust them to spend my money wisely because they are too far away. They don't know me or my needs.
it's all about the scale of trust and accountability. The source argues that this is how we should structure our world. Better fences make better neighbors. We shouldn't be trying to force everyone on Earth into one giant, homogeneous, centrally planned soup.
That's where the interventionistas, as the text calls them, go wrong.
The interventionistas. The people who fly into complex situations and try to impose universal, one-size-fits-all values on specific, local conflicts. The source uses the Levant as a prime example. Trying to face Shiites, Christians, and Sunnis to hold hands and sing Kumbaya in one unified state usually fails and leads to more violence.
It creates endless friction and resentment.
But if you give them fences, distinct boundaries, and administrative separation, they can actually get along just fine as neighbors. They can trade, they can interact peacefully, but they need their own space to eat their own turtles, to live by their own rules.
It's the difference between being a roommate and being a neighbor. I can be great friends with my neighbor, but if you force us to live in the same room and share a bathroom, we might end up killing each other.
Precisely. Scaling matters. It's not just about size, it's about the very nature of human interaction.
So we've established that you need to eat your own turtles and that this works best in small, accountable groups. But what about the nature of risk itself? The source introduces a wonderful Greek concept, synkindinio.
Synkindinio. It sounds like the name of a secret society, but it's actually a very practical concept from ancient maritime law.
What does it mean, literally?
It literally means taking risks together.
In the same boat.
Quite literally, yes. The source uses the story of St. Paul's voyage from the Acts of the Apostles in the Bible to illustrate it.
Right. So Paul is being transported to Rome as a prisoner on a ship.
Exactly. And they sail into a massive storm, a tempest, the Bible calls it. The ship is being tossed and turned, it's taking on water, and it's in very real danger of sinking and killing everyone on board. To save the ship, the captain makes a decision. They have to lighten the load. They have to start throwing the cargo overboard.
Which is mainly corn.
The corn, yes. Now imagine you are the merchant whose specific crate of corn just got tossed into the Mediterranean Sea. You'd be furious. Why my corn? Why not his corn over there? Why not the olive oil? This is totally unfair.
You'd feel like you were singled out and had to bear the whole loss.
But under the ancient Rhodian law, the lex Rhodia, it didn't matter whose specific corn was tossed overboard. The law stated that what has been lost for the benefit of all must be made up by the contribution of all.
So everyone on the ship has to chip in to cover the loss.
Everyone, the owner of the ship, the other merchants, maybe even the crew. If I lose my corn to save your life and your cargo, you owe me a percentage of that loss. If we're on the same boat, we share the same risk. That is synkindinio.
That seems incredibly fair. It creates a completely unified incentive. Everyone's top priority is making sure the ship survives because we're all in it together.
And it is the exact opposite of what we so often see in modern finance. The source contrasts this ancient wisdom with what it calls the Bob Rubin trade.
Bob Rubin, the former Treasury Secretary and executive at Goldman Sachs and Citigroup.
The archetype here represents any trade where you are able to transfer the risk to other people while you keep the immediate upside for yourself. In the banking crisis leading up to 2008, the big banks kept the immediate upside. They paid themselves massive record-breaking bonuses during the boom years.
And they said it was because they were geniuses, masters of the universe.
We are allocating capital efficiently. We're the smartest guys in the room. When the storm finally hit and the ship was sinking, who paid for the corn that had to be thrown overboard?
The taxpayers, you and me.
The taxpayers.
Right.
The government bailed them out.
Yeah.
The bankers didn't eat their turtles. The public did. That is the fundamental violation of Cinquentinho. It's risk transfer, not risk sharing.
It's the classic privatization of profits and socialization of losses.
Exactly. And the source argues this is the absolute definition of a broken, fragile system. If you want the bonus, you must be willing to go down with the ship. No exceptions.
And this brings us to the modern distortions of this principle. We see this risk transfer not just in banking, but in areas we rely on every day for truth and health, journalism and medicine. Let's talk about the journalists first.
This is a really provocative section because it turns a lot of conventional wisdom on its head. The source accuses journalists of talking one's book, but with a twist.
Okay, usually talking one's book is an insult in the world of finance.
It is. It's a huge insult. It means you are biased. If I own a lot of Microsoft stock and I go on CNBC and say Microsoft is the future of computing, everyone should buy it, I'm talking my book. I have a clear financial incentive to punk up the stock price.
So conventional journalism ethics say you should be neutral. You shouldn't own what you report on to avoid a conflict of interest.
We think unbiased means owning nothing. We think that detachment equals objectivity. But the source argues this is not only wrong, it's actually dangerous.
Why? Neutrality sounds so much safer.
Because if a journalist has no skin in the game, they suffer no penalty for being wrong. They can write a glowing profile of a fraudulent company like Enron in the past, or Theranos more recently, and when it all collapses into a pile of lies, they just write another article saying, who could have possibly known?
They don't lose their job, they don't lose their house, they suffer no consequences.
They have absolutely no downside. This creates what the source calls collective mirages. Journalists, especially in the age of the internet, tend to copy each other. It's much safer to be wrong in a crowd than to be right all by yourself. If every major outlet says the housing market is stable and you're the lone voice saying it's a bubble, you look like a crank. But if you're all wrong together, it's just an unforeseen event or black swan.
So the source has that great line, don't tell me what you think, tell me what you have in your portfolio.
Exactly. The person who actually owns the stock and talks about it has real skin in the game. If they are wrong, they lose money. That pain is a powerful credibility signal. The user, the investor, the entrepreneur who's all in is the best advocate because they are eating their own turtles, good or bad.
That completely flips the entire idea of conflict of interest on its head.
It suggests that what we call conflict of interest might actually be alignment of interest, as long as the downside is shared as much as the upside.
Now let's move to the doctors. I have to say, this part of the deep dive really scared me. The visit to the doctor.
It should scare you. This is the agency problem in its purest, most biological, and most personal form.
We tend to trust doctors implicitly. We're in a vulnerable position, and we think, they're the experts, they took an oath, they want to save lives.
And most of them do. I truly believe that. But they operate within a system. And that system has metrics, incentives, and most importantly, legal risks that warp their decisions.
The source talks about the critical difference between the patient's skin in the game and the doctor's skin in the game.
Right. What is the patient's skin in the game? It's their health, your life. You want to live to be 90. You want to feel good and play with your grandkids. What is the doctor's skin in the game?
Their career, their license.
Their career, their reputation, and maybe most of all, their liability insurance. They want to avoid a lawsuit at all costs. They want good stats so the hospital looks good. And those two goals, your long-term health and their immediate career safety, are not always aligned.
The example given is cancer treatment, which is terrifying.
It is. So let's say a hospital is judged by its 5-year survival rate for a certain type of cancer. That's the big metric the government or the insurance companies look at to rank them.
Okay, that sounds reasonable on the surface. We want people to survive for 5 years.
It sounds reasonable. But now the doctor has 2 choices for a patient. Option A is a new type of laser surgery. It's very precise. It removes just the tumor with minimal damage. But maybe it's a tricky procedure and the 5-year survival stats are just slightly lower. Option B is old-fashioned radiation.
Radiation, that just sounds harsh.
It is. It's incredibly toxic. It's like dropping a bomb. It burns the bad stuff, yes, but it also damages a lot of the good stuff around it, including your DNA. It might have a better 5-year survival rate on paper because it just nukes everything in sight. But it is known to cause secondary tumors 20 years down the road.
So radiation looks better on the scorecard today, but it might kill the patient in 2 decades.
Exactly. But the doctor and the hospital are judged on the 5-year metric. The system pushes the doctor to choose radiation to make the stats look good now, effectively transferring the risk of that second tumor onto the patient in the future.
The doctor doesn't suffer when the patient gets sick again in 20 years.
No, he's probably retired and playing golf in Florida. The patient pays the price. That is a brutal transfer of uncertainty from the present to the future.
And then there's the liability trap, the statins example. This feels like something that must happen every single day in clinics across the country.
It does. You go to a cardiologist, you are a mild risk case. Maybe your cholesterol's a little high, but you're otherwise healthy. Maybe you don't really need medication. You just need to eat less cheese and, jog a little more.
But the doctor isn't just thinking about your health. He's thinking about the worst case scenario.
He's thinking about the lawsuit. If he does nothing, if he tells you to just change your diet and jog, and you have a heart attack and drop dead next week, even if it's a 1 in a million chance, his career is over. He gets sued for negligence. The headline is, "Doctor tells patient to jog, patient dies."
So for the doctor, the act of doing nothing is incredibly risky.
Highly risky. But if he prescribes the statins, and those statins cause nasty long-term side effects that hurt you 10 years from now, things like muscle degeneration, brain fog, liver issues, those side effects are hidden. They are distant. He won't get sued for that. It's too hard to prove the connection.
So the safe bet for the doctor is to overmedicate you.
The legal system creates a powerful incentive for the doctor to overtreat you to protect himself, not necessarily to protect you. He is transferring the immediate legal risk from his shoulders onto your body in the form of a hidden long-term health risk.
That is genuinely terrifying. It's the Bob Rubin trade of medicine. The doctor takes the upside, fees, legal safety, and transfers the downside, side effects, to the patient.
And the source suggests the only real way to protect yourself is to understand this fundamental asymmetry.
So how do we protect ourselves? What can you do?
The suggestion is to not treat mild illnesses with heavy intervention. Save the powerful medicine for the tail events, the really bad stuff where the risk of doing nothing is obviously higher than the risk of the treatment. And always, always ask the question, "Doctor, what would you do if you were me?" Or even better, what did you do when you had this condition?
You have to check if they're eating their own turtles.
Exactly. That's the only real test.
It really makes you rethink every single interaction you have with an expert. You have to constantly ask yourself, where is the risk in this situation? Is it on them or is it all on me?
It should. I think if this deep dive does one thing, it should be to change how you view advice and transactions. Once you see the asymmetry, you can stop being the sucker at the table.
So let's try to wrap this up. We've covered a lot of ground today. From the fisherman in Mercury to the Wall Street wine dinners, from the corn in Rhodes to the doctor's office. Let's distill this into the key takeaways for everyone listening.
Sure. I think there are 4 really big ones that stand out.
Hit me.
Number 1, and this is the big one, asymmetry is the enemy. If the person feeding you doesn't eat the food, if they don't share in the downside, run away. That is the fundamental rule that underpins everything else.
Number 2, beware the phrase good for you.
Yes. If someone offers you advice that is framed as being good for you, but is also very clearly good for them, you need to be deeply suspicious. Check for the axe.
Number 3, ethics are local. They don't scale well.
Right. You can't treat the entire world like a village. Understand the difference between the club and the Swiss. Don't expect giant, faceless global corporations to treat you like a neighbor. Build your fences and rely on local accountability.
And number 4, risk sharing. That concept of sincondino is the only way to keep a system healthy and sane.
We need to be in the same boat. We need to stop creating systems that allow people to transfer risk to the future, to the taxpayers, or to the patients. If we share the risk, we'll make better, wiser, and more sustainable decisions.
This leads us to our final provocative thought. The source material ends with a really pointed reflection on a specific group of people. Administrators.
Bureaucrats.
Yeah.
People running the systems from behind a desk. The people who write the rules for the doctors and the bankers and the teachers.
And the text suggests that unlike the doctor, who at least has some skin in the game, even if it's the wrong kind, like fear of a lawsuit, administrators often have zero skin in the game.
They are the ghost in the machine. They make the rules. They set the metrics. But they're completely insulated from the consequences of those rules. If the school system fails because of their policies, the administrator still gets paid. If their foreign policy causes a war, the politician's son doesn't go to the front lines. If the bank crashes, the regulator keeps his comfortable government job.
So if administrators are the ultimate source of the malfunctioning system, and they exist everywhere, in every facet of modern life,
It raises a truly terrifying question. Are we building a civilization that is designed from the ground up to transfer risk away from the decision makers entirely? Are we building a world where the people steering the ship are guaranteed to be the first ones onto the lifeboats?
and if that's the case, how do we ever force them back onto the deck? How do we make the cook eat the turtles in a world run by committees?
That is the challenge, I think, for our generation, to find a way to reintroduce consequences, to put the skin back in the game for the people at the top. Because if we don't, the stew is going to get a lot worse for everyone else.
Something to chew on, hopefully something better than the turtles. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.
See you next time.